Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking another look at a Holy Lion deck. This is the pretty standard Holy Lion deck. If you've seen my previous video on Holy Lion, it was basically identical deck as it's really solid and still does a wonderful job. It's also not super cheap as it used to be. I mean, you could definitely bring it down to be cheaper. Cutting Legendary Fighter, for example, would definitely bring it down to at least, a 9 Legendary deck, but since the additions of things like Holy Lord and stuff, you really can't bring this deck much further down, so we're going to get right into this and check it out. So I really want to bring you guys some newer content as far as decks go for Shadowverse. I want to ease off Shadowverse a little bit, but at the same time I still want to keep that regular content coming for those guys who are here mainly for that. So it's going to get a little more interesting in the next few weeks as I try and, transition at least a little bit, but really, it's a very stale situation right now until mini expansion, so really we're just recovering decks that we've covered before, going through some matchups and just kind of having some fun with it. I can't really find many good deck lists to really showcase that aren't just pretty much garbage thrown together, so it's a little disappointing. Fortunately, this deck does a really nice job. If I'm going up against something like Blood, I do like to be aggressive. As you can see here, playing out the 1-2 is always a really nice aggressive push. Since I also plan on using Prism Swing on 3, it was actually okay to set up that previous amulet to draw a couple of cards and not have to worry about playing followers. And of course they went for the Disciple of Lust, which is actually pretty reasonable, especially since we got Blackened Scripture. So we can take this out and start setting up our Holy Lions. Holy Lion is definitely a very solid play. And now they're going very wide. They don't appear to want to leave up anything too major. Leaving up the Holy Lion might have been a bad choice. Although, they could definitely work. I think Holy Lion of Salvation is still a pretty good play. I mean, Blood typically has a little bit of trouble in the early game dealing with things like Ward, so definitely going to get us some value, even if that is just killing off an Evo point. Since they are just short on most ways to deal with this. That was a pretty nice way to go about doing it. At least for us though, we have got the Legendary Fighter play, so we can kind of bolster up that. Going for some crystals, spreading out our points, making sure they have to deal with certain things, so we can set up for that Holy Lord. Once Holy Lord can hit the board, we can actually go some mass damage. Evil Eye Demon, worst nightmare to have to deal with. Not what I wanted to see come down on the board. It actually was probably the worst thing that could have happened to this board. Having to deal with it, not fun. So I definitely need some more followers and stuff here, so I definitely need to try and get some more cards in my hand. We're definitely taking a little bit more of a risk now that they are at a point where Dark Feast Bat is almost playable. At least I think that risk is going to be fairly mitigated, since they haven't been able to deal super large amounts of self-damage. And I can't play the Saint Hairs yet because of the, of course, amulet that stopped me from playing followers, but I think we still did an okay way of setting this up. And they are dealing themselves some hefty self-damage. It's actually really good. They only need a little bit more. And that is almost enough. If you include the bat here, it will be. So that bat play definitely just screwed them over big time. Although, even without the bat play, we probably could have won off most of that, since they would have dealt 2 damage to themselves, and that really would have hurt them. But, worked out really well for us. So, following on to our next matchup, we are up against a dragon. This is rotation, do keep it in mind, so rotation's a fairly different beast compared to Unlimited, although at the moment they're definitely all running very similar decks, so at least it helps in that regard. But usually the playstyles are a little more straightforward, less erratic. So again, we got a good Saint Hairs turn 1 play. I really do like playing St. Hairs on 1 if I don't have a good turn 4 setup planned out. In this situation though, I think I've got an okay turn 4, so I really don't need to push to have the bunnies out on 4. Even though it is a really good turn 4 play. And again, we get the good setup with Finn's teaching. I still think that's one of the best ways to go with it if you've got Prism Swing. Prism Swing can deal with almost any early game follower, so being able to just play that on 3 and pass your next turn usually works out. And even if I couldn't use Prism Swing, I did have that Holy Lion Crystal, which was going to work out completely fine either way. So a Full Metal Dragoon and a Dragon Ute. Not what I want to have to deal with today. So we do need a good way to deal with both of these. Seraphic Blade actually does an okay job of letting us wipe these out. And also protecting our board from taking any damage so that, of course, their spell can't actually kill anything off super easily. Plus, we now have the Evoed Bunny effect, which means in the future, any bunnies we do end up getting out and playing will all get buffed, so that will definitely come in handy. Disdain, not exactly what you want to be seeing. At least that did cost them the Evo point and they weren't going to be able to wipe the board completely. The only problem now is that they did end up ramping fairly well. And really there's no way for me to counter that, so all I can do now is try and take the initiative with an amulet that will hopefully stall them. Azure Maiden, most likely looking for, of course, Cocytus, the massive, massive Satan. It's a Holy Lion of Salvation. Should buy some time. Optimally, I actually should have went for the Legendary Fighter play. If I had went for Legendary Fighter Evo Crystal, I could have actually got a pretty decent body out of that had to be killed, so that was probably an incorrect play. Although at this point it probably won't matter too much. They really need to kill off at least 2 things here to make a difference. And since the lions aren't really a 100% necessary target, it probably was good that I left Legendary Fighter on the sideline. And there we go, Holy Lord. Well and truly 12 damage. With the Evo we actually get 14, so it worked out very, very well for us.
You're a solid fighter.
So until I go back and play some of these decks, like, it's been probably a week to 2 weeks since I've played this deck in particular, a little bit longer than that considering when these videos actually come out. And this deck still is an extremely solid one. It does a wonderful job at picking up those wins when you can combo off. Of course, it does seem to falter a bit in the sword matchup. Typically, that tends to be one of my tougher matchups to really deal with, which unfortunately is one of the more common rotation matchups, which is why I wouldn't really ladder itself with this deck, even though it is reasonably solid. If you are looking for something to do missions with, though, this does do an okay job of that and can really handle itself pretty well. So if you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, guys, see ya.